I am happy to have Automotive Seminars as a sponsor for the show. Now, if you're not familiar, Automotive Seminars is a diagnostic technician training company. They've got a website that there'll be a link to in the show notes. And what they offer is top-notch training to technicians like us in the field. I've been taking their training courses for years and have got a ton of benefit out of it. They've got top-notch instructors, John Thornton, Scott Shotton, Scott Manna, and every other month they've got a 2-night course that you can sign up for. Join in, ask questions, and afterwards, you've paid for the course, you can access a recorded version whenever you want. You can rewatch the class 2 years later in case you wanted some details on it, and that is a fantastic feature. So make sure to check out the website to see what courses they have available and what's coming up in the future. This podcast is brought to you by Jarhead Diagnostics. Jarhead Diagnostics manufactures in-house diagnostic equipment and storage solutions, as well as distributes for companies like Pico, ATS, and TopDon. One of my favorite tools that I've bought from Brandon and Jarhead Diag is the case for the U-Scope. If you don't have a U-Scope, you probably should, but if you have one, you got to get one of these 3D printed cases, has a magnet on it, has a full-size BNC lead that you can connect to, and it gets rid of the weak point of that scope, which is the mini BNC connection, which is pretty fragile. This case makes this thing nice and secure and makes it an even better tool than it was. So check out jarheaddiag.com. The link is in the show notes. This episode is brought to you by L1 Automotive Training and Keith Perkins. If you're looking for education on module programming, J2534, EEPROM work, key and immobilizer, electrical diagnostics, or drivability diagnostics, Keith has a website, l1training.com, that's got over 60 hours of training videos on all those subjects and more. When I first started out doing mobile, I utilized Keith's videos on module programming in J2534 in order to get my head wrapped around what I would need for the tooling, the computers, the software setups, what kind of obstacles I would be up against when I'm out there programming modules on cars. And it was a huge benefit to me. And I continue to use the training videos that he has on his website. So I strongly recommend checking out l1training.com. We have got Auto Rescue Tools and Isaac Rodell as a sponsor for this podcast. Hey guys, if you're looking for programming laptops, you want the laptop set up ready to go for programming control modules on vehicles, you need key cutting equipment, you need diagnostic tools, Isaac is your guy. Has all that stuff available for purchase, and the support that he offers along with the purchase has been outstanding. I bought some stuff from him in the past. I got my Dolphin key cutting tool from him several years back. And again, the support has been phenomenal. Helped me out along the way with anything additional I needed to make it work for me. Also, for the month of June 2023, they've got Autel updates for sale. So make sure to check that out as well. Again, that's autorescuetools.com. The link will be in the show notes. Welcome to the Automotive Diagnostic Podcast. We're going to explore ways to sharpen our diagnostic skills, find learning resources, and hear from experts in the automotive field. Hey, what's up, automotive world? This is Sean Tipping with another episode of the Automotive Diagnostic Podcast. Thanks so much for tuning in. I really appreciate it. Before we get going with today's show, I wanted to make an announcement. We are fast approaching January 16th, which probably doesn't mean much to you, but that is the 1-year anniversary of when I started this podcast. I started it on January 16, 2020. That was the first episode.
the infamous year that everybody's enjoyed so much. But I'll tell you what, making this podcast, developing this content has been really fun. It's a lot of work, but it doesn't really feel like work because I've gotten to share what I do out in the automotive field, what I really enjoy, share my passion for it, but also getting to talk to extremely intelligent people in this industry, leaders of this industry. That has been very rewarding in itself, just to get to sit down and have conversations with these people. So, there's more to come. This is going to keep growing. And the other thing that I appreciate is all the feedback that I've gotten as well from all of the listeners and just all the people listening in general. I'm glad that people are actually getting some value out of this and that hopefully this improves the industry, in some small way. So thank you to you, the listeners, for actually tuning in and, downloading, listening to the podcast. Can't say enough about that. And on that note, to celebrate the 1-year anniversary, I'm going to be doing a giveaway. And what I'm going to be giving away is a U-scope. And you've heard me talk about this before. If you haven't, check it out on asewave.com because that's where this thing is from. And I use this thing all the time. It is a 1-channel scope and it's awesome because it's easy to use. It's very high quality and it fits in your pocket. I think every technician out there should have one of these. I think, even just starting out, I think you should have one of these. It is a really powerful tool. But I'm going to be giving one of these away. Now, how do you win this? What am I going to be doing? It's going to be a drawing. How do you get entered into the drawing? What I'm going to be doing is giving this away to somebody who is up and coming or maybe new to this industry, even somebody who's just, you don't necessarily have to be new, but somebody who is looking to improve their skills, to become better in the diagnostic side of this field, to not just be a parts changer, to not just be a quote unquote mechanic, but you want to improve your skills. Now, if you're listening to this podcast, that's probably already you. What this is not geared towards is the 20-year vet who already has 4 scopes. You probably don't need a U-scope, or you probably already have one. I'm looking to give this away to somebody who it's genuinely going to advance their career. It's really going to help them. So, how you enter your name into the drawing, which will be drawn right around January 16th, whatever episode is closest to that date. I need your name, obviously. I'd like to know how long you've been in this industry, the automotive field. And I also want to know what drives you to be the best that you can be in this field. And that doesn't have to be an extremely long answer, but I'd like to know what that is. And you meet all those criteria, I'll put your name into the drawing. You can also nominate someone else. Maybe you know somebody who maybe doesn't listen to the podcast. You should recommend they listen to the podcast. But maybe they don't want to nominate themselves, and you can nominate them. And that's totally fine. So in that case, you would list what drives them to be the best that they can be. What do you see in them? And I'd like to know that. And then your name will be put into a pot. We'll do a drawing, and then I'll send that U-scope out to you. No strings attached. That's it. So check out the show notes. I'll have all the details in there and what you need to do. Check out the Facebook page. I'll have all the details on there on what you need to do. On to the episode for today. Today I have Chris Groff joining me. And if you're not familiar, Chris is an extremely intelligent individual. I was really honored to get to sit down and talk with him today. It was really enjoyable. I actually, I edited the episode, and I enjoyed it just as much the second time around as the first time. He's a really smart guy who's got a passion for the diagnostic side of this field and farm equipment, heavy equipment. I mean, he's got a wide range of expertise, as you'll find out as you listen to this talk. And he actually has a YouTube channel, which is named The Science of Diagnostics. And I'll put the link to that as well in the show notes. Please check that out. really, really high quality videos with some stuff that'll make you think. He has a very good thought process as he goes through these vehicles. So I'm really excited to have Chris on the podcast today. Let's jump right into it. Well, how's it going, Chris?
Not too bad. How are you today, Sean?
Yeah, I can't complain. Doing good. Thanks for joining me on the show here.
Absolutely.
Well, why don't we start off with just tell me and the listeners a little bit about yourself and what you do in the automotive field and elsewhere.
So I started out originally, first job was at a golf course, cutting grass. And the mechanic there just I've always taken things apart, put them back, well, tried to put them back together. That normally took a little longer. But I always liked knowing how things worked. And the mechanic there started teaching me sharpening, reel mowers, tuning up the engines. And I found I enjoyed doing that a lot more than anything else I was doing there. Ended up getting a job at a local gas station, annoyed the crap out of all the mechanics there all the time. And it just kind of built from there. I ended up going to Penn College of Technology up in Williamsport, Pennsylvania for Caterpillar diesel. So I was in the diesel world for a while, working on construction equipment. Took a little break from automotive and equipment, went into restaurant equipment repair because I wanted to learn about HVAC stuff. So took a little side note, came back in, worked for John Deere for a dealership for about 5 years. And that kind of petered out. And then I got actually from Brandon Steckler, was talking to him the one day, and he's like, hey, this shop I was at, last shop I was at, they're looking for a guy. I was like, I'll go down and talk to him. And that's how I ended up here. I'm at Lycon Auto in Bristol, PA. And it worked out really, really good. So I've kind of bounced through every aspect of the industry. I mean, I've done trash trucks, fire trucks, over the road, construction equipment, farming equipment, automotive. So I've seen the pluses and minuses of every side of the industry, and it's been fun.
Yeah, that's a wide range of different things to to overcome. I'm sure there's challenges and good things to all of it, but to see that wide range, I'm sure that probably helps you out a lot, no matter which one you focus on. I mean, if it's just automotive, I would imagine you can pull from your experience from all of that stuff to help you fix a, light duty truck or car.
Oh yeah, absolutely. It's you'll hear it a lot. There's the basics. It's basic mechanical principles, basic laws of physics, Ohm's law, Kirchhoff's law, Pascal's law. I mean, they govern everything. So yeah, okay, you're doing a misfire on a $750,000 combine. It's still an engine. It's still got pistons, still got rods, still got the same basic technology. So you can pull from different things. And like the automotive world, just in the past, 5-10 years, really getting into GDI, high pressure fuel systems. It's thrown some technicians for a loop. Diesel world's had that for decades, higher fuel pressure. So, you can pull from diesel to do this. You can pull a lot of the testing techniques, the scope techniques, the scan tool techniques that are very commonplace and very well taught in the automotive industry, really haven't made it that far into medium heavy duty off-road. Scope testing is non-existent in a lot of it. I went to a lot of John Deere training. The only time you would ever even hear the word scope was when they were showing you a scope capture of a CAN bus network, and they're saying, basically, it's either good or it's not. You don't need this. So, things like RC tests, cam crank correlations, which is incredibly commonplace in automotive. Diesel world really wasn't doing that. And they're still not to the level the automotive is, but, knowing something as simple as a cam crank correlation, certain skid steers I used to work on, to check timing on it, to make sure your cam gear hadn't spun, approximately 32, 35 hours to pull the engine out, pull the front cover, check the timing, put it back together.
Jeez.
Or you do an RC and a cam crank correlation, 15 minutes later, boom, done.
Yeah, so, holy cow. I know, I have extremely limited experience with like the heavy duty or especially the farm equipment. But I remember one time I was working in a shop and I'm kind of out in the sticks, and somebody brought a big tractor that had it had the enclosed unit up front where the driver would sit, and there was actually air conditioning in there, and they wanted their AC charged. And I'm like, well, I don't know how to work on a tractor, but I looked and it still had the 134
Yep.
ports on it. I'm like, okay, well, I guess this is actually the same. And I found throughout my career, if you take a growth mindset into this stuff and you're like, okay, let me take what I already know and apply it to this other area, it's really not that different. Again, like you said, the basics still apply to all this stuff. Electricity doesn't care if it's a big tractor or a Honda or whatever. You can still apply the same stuff. So I know for me, at one point in my career, I was scared of taking on something new because it wasn't what I was taught or familiar with. But you can learn this stuff, especially in the automotive world. You actually, just in the auto world, I think you learn such a wide range of topics and skills that, man, you can apply this to so many different things. I fixed my furnace a couple of weeks ago. I know nothing about furnaces, but I had a voltmeter and I figured it out. I was like, okay, cool. This isn't so bad.
Yeah. And that's one of the things I've built everything I do off of is you can pull from everything. Any experiences in your life, everything kind of is interrelated to some degree or another. I mean, even carpentry skills, plumbing skills, all this. There are times where those techniques, those skills, even that troubleshooting process you would use for it can translate in over into other things. Doing field work for John Deere and doing some mobile stuff and everything else, there are times you don't have the right tool. You don't have this, you don't have that, you don't have, you're pulling a final drive off of a bulldozer and your crane on your truck goes down. You can still do it. There's ways around it, and it's always, I guess I got myself into trouble situations quite a bit because I never said no to anything. I didn't, it's been at a shop for a year, it's all torn apart. Yeah, okay, we'll give it a shot. At the end of the day, it's nuts and bolts, it's simple rules, and you can work your way through it. The biggest thing for me, because I took on steam engines. If I can get service info for it, that's where I'm going for it.
Okay.
Even some stuff, you can work backwards. I mean, to be successful as a technician, be it automotive, heavy duty diesel, whatever, all the guys really share and girls share the same general mindset, which is logical troubleshooting, being able to apply skills and being able to work through things. I mean, if you have the core basics of being a mechanic, it doesn't matter what it is, you can work on it. If somebody comes in tomorrow with a horse and buggy, you can fix it. Just like you can fix, with the proper training, a fully autonomous vehicle coming down the road in 5-10 years. As long as you have, like you said, that growth mindset and a desire to succeed, you'll be able to do it.
Yeah, it's almost like you build a confidence in yourself that you can learn something new and not be scared of that new thing because, oh, I've never done this before. Let's send it to the dealer. Or I don't know, maybe you work at the dealer, you don't have that choice. But I worked in the aftermarket, and that was a lot of attitudes. Heck, it was my attitude some of the time. But you get that confidence to say, yeah, I can figure this out. I'm not scared of tackling this new thing that I haven't seen before, because I've done it before on so many other things. And the more you go along, the more you realize, okay, well, this isn't that big of a deal. I'm just going to learn it. I'm going to seek out that information, find that service information, or do whatever other research you need to online and figure it out. But I mean, for somebody that's new, that's starting in this field, I think that's pretty eye-opening for them to realize that they can figure this out. They can tackle something new. And the more you do it, the easier it gets, I think, anyways. But still get my butt kicked on lots of stuff all the time. So who knows?
Oh, I do as well. But, just working in a lot of different shops. I mean, when I was learning, I remember how awesome it felt to even stupid things. The first time you get a wheel that's stuck to a hub and everybody else knows quick tap here, boom. But the first time you get it, you're like, yeah, I did it. And it builds up. And as you take on bigger and bigger challenges, there's that feeling. But what's even cooler is once I started to build my skill set and do more, having other people in the shop, when you get a chance to teach them something, or explain something, walk through a diag, walk through, a shortcut, and seeing that light go off, it's what even cooler than doing it yourself is helping somebody else achieve that same level. And to me, that's actually more enjoyable.
Oh, I 100% agree. That's why I went into teaching is, because I'd be in the shop and I liked helping people. And it's tough when you're on flat rate because you're generally sacrificing your productivity if you're taking your time to help somebody else. But I enjoyed it that much. Not just doing it for them, but helping them understand or helping them build their skills. That is such a satisfying feeling to be able to do that. And now that I'm in the teacher role at the community college, it's so cool. I mean, sometimes I think, I'm like, gosh, I get paid to do this. This is crazy. It's a lot of work, but I mean, it's such a rewarding career. I love it. I think it's awesome.
Yeah, it's, I know just a little bit of training I was doing when I was with Deere, building stuff for the shop, pulling guys aside, this guy needs a little help here, there. Even going to training classes, I found a lot of times, during lunch breaks or as we're going through something, I found I was constantly teaching somebody this or that, or maybe rephrasing what an instructor said. And I found I really did enjoy teaching. And so, I started a YouTube thing a while ago just to do John Deere stuff because there's not a whole lot out there. And meeting people in the industry, one thing led to another. I got more opportunities to do some training. And it doesn't matter how bad of a day I've had, how backed up on work or anything else. All of it's kind of worth it when I can put together a little thing or even just teach somebody in 10, 15 minutes, a little tip. It's ridiculously rewarding, and I'm not even doing it as a full-time gig. I can only imagine seeing students come and go year after year, how much satisfaction you get, and then having them, 5, 10, 15 years down the road, seeing some starting their own shops, being successful. I mean, it's a lasting legacy. It's pretty cool.
Yeah. Helping them get their career going and provide for themselves and or their families. That's what it's all about. Your YouTube channel, I was actually watching a few videos on there. That stuff's awesome. You got a passion for the diagnostic side of things, which is really cool because I feel the same way. Obviously, I spend all my time podcasting about it, so I think it's no secret that I love this stuff too. What do you think that is about the diagnostic side of things, whether it be automotive or farm equipment, that you love so much?
Well, when I first started out working on anything, I was all thumbs. I would struggle getting ratchets, wrenches in the right places, learning all that. But one thing I always kind of noticed was I could always figure out a way to get a job done. And I always like challenges, puzzles, all that. And as time went on, like when I first started, I didn't know there was diagnostics. I didn't know there was a thing. I just knew car would come in, customer had a complaint, mechanic would order some parts, and we put the parts on, and it's good. And there were a lot of old timers I worked with who were the guys who could say, listening to a carbureted vehicle, just tweak that a little bit here and perfect. Or, hear a car start up and be like, yeah, it needs timing chains or it's this. I didn't have that experience. I didn't have that skill set. And so I started doing some research, talking to people and all, and I found out about this thing called diagnostics, that fancy computer box they're hooking up. It's actually giving them info and they're putting the pieces together to form a complete picture. And that's how I got started. But even that, the earliest guys I learned from were very basic scan tool users. It was still very much, not so much parts throwing. There was a little bit of diagnostics behind it, but it would be years until I started Scanner Danner and others started coming across, they have lab scopes. You can do ignition tests. And I'm like, well, this is kind of awesome because now I don't need my 35 years of experience to be able to hear an ignition coil that's arcing somewhere. I can prove it. I can prove it out in hard data, which is my big thing. I'm a big hard data guy. I'm a big service manual, documentation, schematics. You do gain a certain feel, but to me, diagnostics became the thing that kept me entertained. It was challenging, but it also leveled my playing field because I could build these hard skills and really develop a sense of how everything worked. And then when I got a chance to repair it, I could build those. So it was, I'm not saying somebody can come in with 6 months of tech school and immediately become a diagnostic tech, but I think with all the technology, the education that's available out there, Facebook, YouTube, diag.net, all over, we live in a completely different world where you can really accelerate almost any aspect of your training to whatever level you want in a relatively short amount of time compared to having to spend 10, 15, 20 years building it up before.
Yeah, YouTube and social media groups and the internet in general has expanded what's available to any technician in this field so much. I wish I had half the resources that we have now when I was first getting into this. I think IATN was the only thing around when I was first getting into the field, and we utilized that and Identifix and stuff like that. But man, the like you said, Scanner Danner and some of the awesome YouTube channels out there, it's so cool to be able to pull from that information in order to grow your skills. But yeah, it's just it is a challenging thing to do diagnostics, and I guess that's part of what keeps me coming back to it all the time. Is it forces me to keep growing and learning and getting challenged again and again. It's just not the same thing over and over again. You're always pushing yourself a little bit to be better, to figure out this new your problem that you're presented with.
And I do find it's at times it spoils me because I have a really bad problem when it comes to diagnostics. I don't care how long it takes, I will find the problem if I can get approval. I mean, there's times where I know I'm running over my time. I stay late at night, do it on my own time, test it 5, 6, 7 different ways. But honestly, the more I've gotten into diagnostics, once I have that problem sorted out, I don't care anymore. And that's been a struggle for me, is getting to most of it I do. We've got 8 techs in the shop, so most of it is I'll blow out 4 or 5 diags, work gets divvied up, and I get the next batch of them. But sometimes I'm just like, all right, we know what the problem is. Cool. I'm done with the car. I would make a terrible doctor.
Yeah.
You got heart failure. All right, see ya.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun though. I mean, it really is. It's always challenging. There's always something new to learn. And you could do 8 million network comm diagnostics, but each one has its own little intricacies, little things that are, this may be acting up this way or this. And it's kind of cool. There's still pattern failures, but I don't know. Everyone to me is just a little different, even though I've seen it 5, 6, 10 times. It's just that little bit of a difference. And then I like going back, looking over what I did and saying, okay, on the next one that's similar, instead of doing A, B, C, D, let me try doing C, F, H, Z. Let's see how many different ways we can do this and kind of get a better understanding of the system.
That right there is a powerful tool. If you can, take the time to utilize it, is analyzing your process and what you went through, documenting it somehow, paper or electronically or even in your head. But I think it's good to write it down somewhere, and deciding, okay, what could I do better, more efficiently, more accurately the next time? If you can do that, which it is time consuming. If you're on flat rates, you got to do that on your own time. But the payback for that, I think, is huge. So I think I would highly suggest that to anybody who's doing this stuff, is even if you're just getting going, document what you did, go over it, say, can I do this better? Can I improve on this some way? Or one thing I like to do, even in the moment, if I find, I get to my conclusion, I'm like, okay, this is the broken part. I like to say, how can I prove this thing out another way? How could I do another test? I don't need to right now. I know this is the part that's failed, but how could I prove this another way with a different test, a different method? Because there might be at some point, in some situation where you have to do that. So it's a good thing to have in your arsenal. But yeah, that's the sort of thing. You got to spend that extra time if you want to improve your skills.
Yeah. And that's the way Steckler always puts it is 3 arrows in the target when you're doing a diagnosis. And that's exactly what you're saying is we proved it out this way. Can we prove it out 2 or 3 other ways in order to, if all signs still point to that component, that's where we're at. And one thing I'll add is don't only analyze your own stuff. Analyze the case studies you're reading on Facebook, diag.net, the YouTube videos. Watch through them and then hit pause and go, so why did he do that there? What allowed him to make the jump from symptom A to looking at scan data or to grabbing a scope? Kind of sit there, write down notes. And how to put this, I spent a lot of time in the beginning getting involved in all this stuff just on my own, not realizing there was a huge community out there to pull from. IATN I found later on in my journey, same with diag.net and the others. YouTube was a huge comeuppance. That was, interacting with all sorts of people. But I spent a lot of time learning on my own and learning from mistakes, reading service manuals, trying to piece it together. And I missed the whole social community component. And so I really push that on a lot of people now is, yeah, you can do the research on your own, but interact with people, get on, group chats, do Zoom meetings, do live streams, whatever you want to do, bounce some ideas around, have some fun, do some, we just did, I guess about a year ago, a get together up in Staten Island with a group of us and just a whole bunch of broken cars and everybody, let's go at it. How do you diag it? How do you? Let's work together. And I think that's kind of an underserved portion of the automotive community that we've only really been seeing more in recent years is that team building and that group think kind of has a negative connotation to it, but grouping together, working through problems and passing on the knowledge. So.
Yeah, having a network is so powerful. We did a get together like that. It was about a month and a half ago around here, and there's only 4 or 5 of us, but it was so cool to all put our brains together on one car and see everybody's approach and see the thought process through it, because we all had different ways that we wanted to attack this problem. We all had different tools or different methods or different utilizations of the service information in order to attack what we were going after. And just seeing that was a huge learning process for me to see, wow, everybody's got a different way. And I can pull from these and maybe they can pull something from mine. Yeah, I'd recommend anybody to do that. Or even, just get in contact with people. You don't have to be in, physical contact nowadays, of course, COVID, but you can still reach out to people with all the tools we have with Zoom and Facebook and stuff, which so cool that that's available to us.
Yeah, I love it because a couple group chats I'm in, you'll sit there and you'll have a little game. Somebody will give you symptoms and some codes. And I mean, it's just amazing to see 6 completely different mindsets, different sets of experiences, and how they approach it. And I find myself more times than not going, I never would have thought of that, or I never would have made that jump, or, hey, I didn't even know that data PID existed, or, tooling functionality, whatever it may be. I think a lot of times we get caught up with, you need to have this scope, or you got to have this scan tool, or you got to have this, that, or the other thing. Once again, networking with the community, you can see the guy who's, doing spot on diagnostics with a $300 code scan or scan tool, a test light and a few other things. And you can see the guy who's got, $100,000 worth of diag equipment, and both have valid points to their processes. And I like to say there is no one perfect process. It's really based on each individual. Like, a lot of times I'll be running through something and start making connections I can't explain right away. And I got to put the pieces together and I make jumps. The process I go through doesn't always work for the next guy. And his may not work for this person over there. But when you're networking, you can learn some of these different techniques and you pull them out of the hat as you need them. You know, there's a reason we have 10 different 916 wrenches. Same reason you've got 10 different diagnostic processes you can go through, you know, whatever best suits that situation.
Yeah, and everybody's got their own life and career experience too. And I go to a lot of shops. I do my mobile thing, and you go to some of these shops where you've got guys that they've been in the field for 20, 30 plus years, and you know, maybe they're not the best at this CAN bus problem. That's not their thing, but they've got, you know, a lot of experience that I can't even fathom in a whole nother area. Like I go to a lot of transmission shops. I'll talk to these guys about transmissions because I know very little about the inner workings of transmission. I've built one in my entire life. So I talk to these guys about, okay, hey, you know, I had this 4L60 is doing this the other day. What's going on with the hydraulics in this? And they know this thing like the back of their hand. And so being able to connect with people and pull, you know, off of their experience and share your own, everybody should be doing that if you're not.
Yeah. I still triple counter shaft, Mac transmission, 18 speeds. I'll rebuild those all day long. Automatics, nope, no thank you. And it's all hydraulics. I mean, once again, coming from equipment, doing a ton of hydraulic work, I'll read through an automatic transmission hydraulic schematic and service info. I get how the valves are working. I get the check valves and all that. But certain things, it just becomes too time consuming at times for me to learn the entire transmission in my hour diag. And that's, once again, networking. You build up those relationships with the transmission guy or the engine guy or this guy. And then you're talking to them and everybody helps everybody because, you know, you diagnose that transmission. Well, that trans shop's going to be getting that job. You're not rebuilding it. So everybody wins. And that's kind of what the industry should be all about, is no one person can take on every job. So let's just keep working together, learning from each other and building it up. I help you, you help him, he helps them. Everybody wins in the long run and we all get elevated. And that's really what it should be about.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, as long as everybody's contributing, obviously, you know, you've got to do your part. I think that probably goes without saying. But as long as someone's, you know, trying and they've done their legwork, I'll help anybody that's looking for help. Definitely, that's how I wish everybody would be like in this industry. Obviously, that's, you know, it's not the way it is everywhere, but we can keep pushing, trying to make it happen. So I want to talk to you about your presentation at Vision last year. I didn't make it to Vision last year, but I watched what you had on YouTube from it. Well, actually, it was the Trained by Techs. I think you did the same or similar presentation. But what was that like presenting at Vision? I got to imagine that'd be really nerve-wracking with all the people in the room.
Yeah, so it was actually Jim Morton and Bryn Klein both messaged me on Facebook around the same time that they first announced they were going to be doing this Tech Talks, and they were looking for submissions. And I'm like, yeah, I'll look into it. And I pulled the website up. And I mean, I dragged my feet. I did. I'm like, man, I've got nothing good enough for this. I mean, this is Vision. This is the conference everybody goes to. And between those two and a couple others and a real close friend hounding me, it was, I want to say, 2 hours before the submission deadline. I finally submitted, 2 ideas for it. And I didn't hear back right away. And then I got picked. So I'm like, okay, this is pretty cool. And it was, I almost didn't make it to Vision. It was a ride. I was all over the country. I drove through the night to make it there, showed up late to my first class. All the Trained by Tech guys were great and making sure everything got done. And it was a hell of a week. And everything coming up to that Saturday, I'm getting more and more and more nervous. And I'm like, I got no clue how many people are going to be in the class. And I'm sitting there in the front with Matt Fonslow and Bryn and Brian Collada and Richard Falco and all. And I'm like, one, these guys are all awesome. They're huge industry names. I'm lucky to just be sitting here. And then I start seeing the people wandering in. I mean, you've got some of the top trainers in the industry are all coming to sit there and watch us talk. And I'm like, oh, great. It was like, I was hoping, for me, if it was, just a bunch of regular technicians and all, it would have been a lot easier than standing in front of some of the absolute best in the industry. Like, don't say something stupid, don't say something stupid. But once I got up there, I mean, the first couple minutes was rough, and then it felt natural, and it was cool. Everybody was really supportive of everybody's talks, and they laid it out really well to where everybody's talks kind of complemented each other, and we could all pull different pieces, and it was incredibly rewarding. I mean, I'll say, all that came within a year of really getting heavily involved in the whole community part of the automotive industry, going from doing everything by myself, going solo, to being thrown in the middle of all this. I mean, it was absolutely amazing. It was a huge honor. I was disappointed that, Vision had to be digital this year, but I really am hoping that they continue the Tech Talk segment, because I think you're going to see a lot of really, really cool stuff coming out of that. And it's not just for somebody who wants to be a trainer. I mean, I can't tell you how many guys I've talked to that have case studies, just one case study that we could all learn a lot from, and that gives them a chance to really present it on a larger scale. But it's a whole different world, doing 5-10 guys in a shop to, I believe we had almost 100 people in that classroom. So I'm like,
holy cow.
Yeah, it was cool.
Yeah, I teach in front of students, and when I started that, I was really nervous. I've been doing it for about 4 years now, so I feel pretty comfortable presenting in front of students. And I've never done it, in person with professionals from the industry, especially, experienced trainers. And I mean, at Vision, you got the best there of technicians and trainers. And so I can only imagine how that feels, the butterflies in your stomach. And I mean, maybe you should have a little bit of that no matter what. You should always feel that energy before you go into something. It means you're excited, but I'd probably be sweating through my shirt.
Oh, yeah. But the way I figured it, with the way that week had been going up to that point, I'm like, I'm here, I made it, we're just going to go with it. And really, the other thing that got me through the fear is, and something I've seen a lot in class, whenever I go to training classes, I'll be that guy that asks every stupid random question, because I know there's a lot of people who are too scared to ask that question. And that's kind of what I thought about when I was standing up there teaching was, you know what? I'm going to make mistakes. I'm going to missay something. I may not illustrate this as, eloquently as I would like to, but that's why I'm here too. This is as much about me getting a chance to present as me learning how to present and how to help others. And I mean, it was kind of, to me, I may have been the one up there talking, but I was learning just as much, if not more, than anybody else in that room. And that's kind of how I try to approach everything. And like you said, that level of excitement, that desire to improve and help other people improve. And that's, I think the worst that happens is I only have 20 minutes to bomb. So
yeah, it's not an 8-hour course.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the design of it was really good for somebody who's not sure if that's for them or not. Because if nothing else, hey, has 20 minutes, now you know whether you want to pursue it or not.
It's addicting though.
Well, yeah. And to your point too, teaching anything, man, that teaches you so much. Teaching is one of the most powerful learning tools as well. So you get into this stuff and you realize how much you don't know, and you want to pursue more, and you end up learning so much more by trying to teach someone else, even if it's something basic. So it's a pretty cool, extra benefit to being able to do this stuff.
Oh yeah. When you got to present it to multiple different types of people, you got to learn to look at it different ways. And then the questions are always the best part, because you get somebody who's looking at it completely differently than you. And you get your own little light bulb, like, that makes a lot of sense. Or no, I don't know why it is that way, but we're going to find out together. So yeah, like you said, it builds you, it builds them. Everybody's a winner.
So in your talk, you mentioned It was about, reading service information, and I suggest anybody who's interested, check it out. You can find it on YouTube. I'll put the links in the show notes to it. But one of the things you were talking about and kind of struck a chord with me was the mind mapping process that you talked about, and it's really just drawing out your thought process, whether it be through a diagnostic or really any process, but we deal a lot with diagnostics. And I really like that. I actually use that with my students when we're getting into diagnostics, and they're doing this for probably the first time, a lot of them. And I think it's a really powerful tool for me and for them, because I have them write it out. I have them write out their thought process even before they even touch the car. They're presented with a problem, and how are you going to tackle this? What are you going to do? Write this out, put it on a piece of paper for me and for you. And for the students, and I think this could apply for anybody, it does for me, I know, it allows them and myself as the instructor to see where their misconceptions are, where they're thinking about something differently, or they're missing something, or they don't understand something correctly. Whereas if they're just jumping on the car and doing it, or they're just telling me, we don't always make that clarification. But once they put it down onto a piece of paper, I think it makes a big difference. So I think anybody that's doing this stuff, it'd be a good experiment just to try to write out your process, what's going on in your head, put it down on a piece of paper, see how it looks, and analyze it, or talk about it with somebody else. I think that's such a huge tool to use.
Oh, without a doubt. Mind mapping, is one way, because think of how complex any given system is. I mean, even if you're just dealing with a basic, as basic as any drivability complaint can be, a basic drivability complaint, you got to factor in fuel trims, mapper, mass airflow sensors, potential for restricted fuel supply. You've got, you really start thinking about it, you've got a lot of different components in any given thing. And until you've developed a strong diagnostic process, you can hop on that car, but you'll quickly lose track of where you are, what you've done, and why you're doing it. And so mind mapping, be it learning a new system, you're sitting at home doing service info, and you start jotting down different system components and just drawing lines out to this does this does that, or getting ready to attack a car. Okay, we have these symptoms. We'll pull first thing I always do is my visual inspection around the car. I don't even pop the hood right away. Then I hook the scanner up. I start running a full code scan. And from there, I start developing my game plan. Now, I don't write everything out all the time anymore, but if it's particularly complex or something I've never done before, I absolutely write it down and I keep track of it. And I found that makes me consistent and it makes it repeatable. You can go through, you can find your weak points, your missed assumptions, and then you can really build off of that each time. Because yes, every car is a job that needs to get done. The customer needs to have it done right at an affordable cost, but that doesn't mean you can't learn from it. Doesn't mean you can't take everything you learned from this one and apply it to this and this and this. So a lot of people say, I don't have the time, I don't feel like it, I don't need to. I still highly recommend you do it. We all invest some degree of our own time and money and effort into training. You're training yourself every day. And if you're not mind mapping, if you're not noting down stuff, even just saving code scans or a quick sketch of what you did, you're throwing away invaluable learning opportunities at the end of every day. And you're setting yourself backwards. So to me, it's a huge step and it makes it repeatable. ATG, I believe, in just about every single manual they have, they've got those little troubleshooting charts, a little mind map to help you work through various symptoms. If you spend the time, you develop that for yourself and your process, I mean, you're going to find within weeks of implementing that your efficiency rate and your ability to understand is just going to start skyrocketing.
Yeah, you said it. I mean, it's an investment. That's what it is. You're giving up some of your time, and yeah, you don't need to write it down every single time, but that your first time around on something, when you're really being challenged by something, that's the point where, okay, let's take the time here. Let's invest the time, and you're going to get a return on that investment later on. I mean, it's the exact same thing as putting money in the stock market. You put money in, and it eventually, hopefully, you get a return. But I think with this, it's almost guaranteed. You just have to take that time at one point or another and use that one vehicle as training, as I don't know, you couldn't say free training, but it's inexpensive training as far as a dollar goes. You just got to invest that time, and you're going to get a return on that eventually. And it's definitely a powerful method to help you along and build those skills. Identify misconceptions is one of the big things. I try to focus on for myself and my students is, where are you missing something? Where is your thought process not what it should be? And that's one of those tools that can really help, pinpoint that for you to say, oh, okay, I didn't think about this. Maybe I should try this thing differently next time. I don't know. Pictures are good for me. I like pictures. So if I draw it out, it works out for me.
Absolutely. And it's a skill they don't really teach in most automotive training programs or technician training programs in general, is not only thinking about it, setting out a game plan, but like I talked about in my talk, understanding the service information that you're going to use to develop that game plan. I mean, I could nitpick any manufacturer out there as far as vague, misleading, outright incorrect service info. But engineering talk, I mean, let's be honest, some of these system descriptions, you're sitting there, it may be a system you've worked on 1,000 times before, but if you really sit there and read that theory of operation, sometimes you're like, I don't know, I don't even understand what's going on here. I don't understand what they're trying to say. And that's something I've been really big on, because getting myself involved in so many different things, especially starting out, and I wasn't skilled in them. I didn't have 20 years of experience to fall back on. I learned very quickly how to pull through service info and learn there are times when I need to spend half of my initial hour reading word for word the theory of operation. And then there's times where I can skim through and I'm looking for data pits. So I skim through a mobilizer circuit theory of operation. And I'm just looking for a quick few acronyms, data pits, something I can get together to pull together a picture. There's a quote I really liked. I want to say it was Einstein. If you give me an hour to solve a problem that's life or death, the first 55 minutes will be, preparing to actually do anything. And that's kind of how I approach most things. I'll pull codes. I'll get a general idea of what's going on. And I'll admit, as much as I'm a service info theory of operation guy, I 99% of the time look at a schematic before I ever pull a theory of operation. And that's just, to me, there's only so many ways things can be wired. And let's be honest, some cars, 50, 60, 70, 80 modules in them now. To read through the theory on each and every module, trying to figure it out, can be a pain. But if we pull up a starting system, we can see where we have direct and indirect inputs, right? We can see our relays. We can see a direct control out from a body control. We can see data lines going over to a trans control or, an instrument panel. And that, to me, is my first step before that theory of operation. I want to see what all's being thrown together in that circuit, and then I can pick and choose and slowly work my way down the funnels, so to speak.
Yeah, you nailed it there. If you are able to read an electrical diagram, which is a skill that anybody should have in this field, obviously, but read it to the point where you can understand system operation just by looking at the diagram. That is so important to be able to do that. And like you said, time saving, and the service information that maybe doesn't give you description operation, or it's really poor description operation, you can figure out so much just from being able to read that diagram and say, okay, I know this has got to be a signal wire. I know this can't be a signal wire because it's tied into 4 other wires. It's got to be, a shared ground or shared power. It can't be the signal wire. Those sort of things are so important to be able to do. And you learn that skill and you save yourself a lot of time, but you'll also be able to figure out those systems where they don't lay it out for you, or it's really technical engineering gobbledygook that you don't understand.
And it's just, there's only so many system designs at the end of the day. I mean, there's infinite variations, but let's think about it. I mean, you've got the Bosch Motronic engine control system, which has been used. Bosch Motronic has been used on European, some domestic stuff for decades. You know, there's only so many different sensors. There's only so many different types of ignition coil injector or anything else. And there's only so many ways you can wire them together. And when you really start analyzing what you're doing in the service info, you'll find you may be working on a Nissan Armada this day and Mercedes-Benz the next day, but over time, you'll start to see little things that, you know, systems are set up similarly, and it helps you learn. Now, the pitfall is the old debate, OE versus aftermarket service info. And I personally found all of them. You will find glaring errors in OE service info that are actually corrected in aftermarket, or vice versa. I use AllData, ProDemand, MotorLogic, Identifix, and OE service info. And there's still times I've had vehicles I've had to consult 3 to 4 different pieces of service info to piece together enough. And that can be time consuming, and it can be frustrating that, you know, not only are you learning a new system, well, now you got to be proficient with your ProDemand or with your MotorLogic or your OE. So, I mean, the level of complexity just in learning a system or pulling the info you need to correctly diagnose or repair a system is pretty overwhelming, which is why I think good reading comprehension and analysis skills is probably, I'd say, top 3 most important skills for any technician. I don't care if you're the engine R&R guy or if you're the top diagnostician who's doing keys and programmings and EEPROM work. That skill set is, you know, to me, top 3 to make you successful.
Yeah. The skill set of just being able to find what you're looking for within whatever service information you're using, that is a valuable skill in itself, because you need to be familiar with the system you're working. And okay, maybe it's got a search bar. You know, the students that I have, they love to use the search bar in ProDemand and AllData, and it's great. I mean, that could be a time-saving thing, but a lot of times I'll tell them, I'm like, don't use the search bar. Try to find it yourself, because at one point or another, that search bar is probably not going to get you what you need to know. Navigate through the actual program so you know how to find this stuff. You know where it's located within the system. You're not just, you know, Googling it. You know, Google can get us a lot of knowledge, but not necessarily the wisdom that we're really after. So it's the same sort of thing there. Having that is, it is a skill set that takes time to learn. I mean, you got to learn these different systems, whichever one you use, but yeah, you probably need all of them nowadays.
And it's interesting. I do, if I'm in a rush and I know the terminology, which is a big thing. So I may be looking for timing chain specs on something. Well, it may not be phrased in a certain bit of service information the way I would phrase it. So until you really start to know, you're better off looking through the manual and learning to find it that way. Almost, it's like learning to use the index in a book. You got to know the terminology, you got to know the layout, but, you know, Googling it, so to speak, within your service info provider, it'll get you most things. Sometimes it'll pull up something completely unrelated, but you'll also notice if you're looking for immobilizer stuff, a lot of times it's in accessories. You know, you're not going to see it under starting charging. And by learning to go through the segments yourself, you really are better understanding the structure. You can find the information better. And AllData, I like using AllData because AllData gives you the linked tree up top, how you got to where you were.
Yeah.
I share that with people a lot where, I help them find Nissan. Nissan gets me every time. The ECM CAN bus input output chart tells you what modules transmit and receive certain bits of data. Super, super helpful for all sorts of stuff. And it always takes me a minute to find it, but I send people the tree. I say, hey, this is the section it's in. And I just screenshot the link tree to let them, okay, I had to go through here, then information bus diagrams. And once you start to build those up, you'll find you can navigate through that service info. What took you 20 minutes before, you can find in 3 minutes. You're more likely to use it. And when you have good info and easy access to it, it's no different than being proficient with your scan tool or your scope or anything else. It's a skill we need to develop. It's a skill that, unfortunately, a lot of shops look down on. A lot of shop owners or shop foremen, service writers, whatever, all they see is somebody sitting there typing away on a computer.
Mm-hmm.
You're buying stuff on eBay. You're wasting time. You're doing, you're playing on the Facebook there, whatever it is. And there's still a pretty heavy push, I think, against taking the time to use service info. Oh, it's Chevy. They've been using the same head bolt torque for 25 years, and until they don't. Well, I know how to time this. You just match this up here, crank. Yep, there goes a few pistons. So it's looked down upon. It's not a fun skill. It's not, you're not going to go to the bar and pick up a bunch of girls with your ability to quickly read through service info. It's not as exciting as running 18 channels on a scope, but it's allows all those other things to get done and to be useful.
Yeah, it's imperative. And yeah, you might look like you're wasting time sitting at the computer or, scrolling through service information before you even pull the car in. And, people around you get this stuff done fast, obviously, flat rates and productivity. And I worked at Firestone forever, so I know how it goes. But again, it's that investment that it's worthwhile, and you got to understand it. If you don't understand what you're working on, you got no chance of fixing it. And that's where you're going to find it, is in that service information, being able to find it. I mean, one of the things that I always point out that's a good example of this is, let's say a manufacturer doesn't give you a great description and operation for a specific system, which is the case a lot of the times. We go through emissions components. We just did that. So it's top of mind for me with my students. And like GM's pretty good. They'll lay it out in description operation. This is how the system works, and this is how it tests for leaks. Okay. Some other manufacturers, not so good. They'll say, these are the components, or they'll say, it's an evap system. It's meant to contain vapors. That's it. And there's not much else. Where do you find information? If you actually go into the DTC information and like the code set criteria and all that stuff, they'll actually explain the system in there rather than a separate description and operation. How would you know that? Well, you got to take the time to actually go through your service information and find that out. And you can learn about how these things are engineered, how it tests the system, how everything works through the code information, which doesn't necessarily, that's not intuitive. That doesn't really make sense to me, why they'd set it up that way, but I know where to find it, or at least I know where to check for. I know that is something that I can actually find in there,
To me, it's the difference between the technical writer who's writing the service info and the software engineer or the system engineer. The system engineer gets to use their fancy terminology and their, for a debounce period of 5 milliseconds and this and that. All that gets to stay in the DTCs. And then the technical writer has to make it pretty and usable and, more easily digestible. But the other thing is, where's all aftermarket service info come from? It's basically rewritten OE info. And certain OEs, GM, really doesn't assume a whole lot about your previous education level. Whereas I found Ford and some of the other ones assume you are a factory trained technician who already has a certain level of knowledge on it. So they're not going to waste their time reprinting that info there. But the DTC descriptions, code setting criteria, even the trouble trees, if you're You read the theory of operation. You read the DTCs. You got weird system symptoms. I found going through those trouble trees, I don't think I've ever followed one start to finish as a diagnostic routine, but little bits of info in there you'll pull out. And all of a sudden you may see something, you're diagnosing a radio circuit, and then you see notice of, we'll say, check pin 4 connector C2 on the TCM. And you're like, wait. Why do I care about the transmission when I'm dealing with the radio thing? Well, there's a reason that's there, and they're not going to explicitly tell you, but that's where you start to analyze and you start to logically think, okay, well, now we're pulling the transmission in this. There's a reason I'm testing this, and let's try a few things. And it may be the transmission's wired in because you got a backup camera in your center stack, and so it's going to turn the radio volume down and flip the reverse camera on when you go into reverse. So now, okay, now I've got these problems. Can I relate that to that TCM? If yes, great. If no, you continue down. But there is all sorts of little tidbits of information that are great there. I know some classes I've gone to have talked about this, but I don't hear it talked about a whole lot. Code set criteria is really great for your post-repair verification test drive too. Okay, most people, we look at it, this is our code set criteria, this is what we're going to test. But on a test drive, you really got to go and put it through those same symptoms to run those same DTCs to see if they come back. I mean, you could drive it from here to Alaska and back again, and if you're not meeting those requirements, you hand it back to the customer, oh yeah, it's fixed. 2 days later, it's sitting back in your bay, and it's a rework at this point.
Yeah, so it's reading that, so it's really interesting. I remember when I was younger in the field, and I was reading that code set criteria, and it was a particular vehicle. I don't know if it's a Chevy or Chrysler or something, and it was like an evap leak code or something. I'm reading all the code set criteria, and one of them is it has to be above a certain ambient temperature, and I don't remember exactly what it was. We'll say 10 degrees. Well, in Minnesota, there's a good portion of the year where it's below that, and I was like, you know what? This time of year, in the 7 years I've been doing this, I don't think I've ever seen one come in for an evap leak code that wasn't there prior. Like, I just don't do any evap leak codes on these cars during this time of year. I'm like, well, that makes sense. That's really interesting to know that. And if I'm fixing one, I want the monitor to run. That should also be something that I need to know, that I can't go park this thing outside in the middle of February and hope that this thing runs its test. I'm going to have to park it in the shop. So yeah, all kinds of really good information. And when the manufacturer provides that for you, that's awesome. Yeah. Of course, there are some that don't. And that can be the struggle, is when they leave it kind of vague. I don't know, for me, it's European stuff, but I also don't work on Euros very often, but I struggle when I do, because there doesn't seem to be that level of info when I go looking.
There is a lot there. There really is. But Chris Martino, he does a good Volkswagen class I went to at Vision. And his main thing was, you got to think like a German. He goes, if you think like a German, it really is. It's laid out beautifully. Everything makes sense.
Okay.
But when you come from a domestic or an Asian mindset, everybody lays it out differently. Ford and GM are the two easiest. Have you ever looked at the actual OBD2 standards that are available on Ford and GM's website? It will take you, so it's I can send you the link for it. But Ford, within the quick links, I believe it is, on the Motorcraft service portal, it drills down to ridiculous levels of detail on all your OBD2 code set criteria, per year, make, year, model, engine, transmission, everything. And if you want to learn a lot, it's great, but it's also intermittence, or, hard to duplicate faults in general. There's a lot of info you can pull there. And like that 10 degrees you were talking about, the ambient temperature. All right, well, I'm in Minnesota. It's January. It's not getting above 10 degrees. I can't have this thing sitting inside. How do I confirm I have the fix, or how do I make it fall? And you got to get creative. I mean, when I was working on equipment, I had tractors that they would complain about a hard start when cold during the wintertime, but summer was the first time they could bring it in. Well, it's 95 degrees in southeastern Pennsylvania. Where am I going to get a 10-degree day? Make a couple phone calls, find somebody with a walk-in freezer outside and drive the tractor into it. I mean, sometimes you got to get creative with this stuff. And once again, that service info is where I go to and start picking and pulling little pieces. And what can I do to duplicate it? And what will this do? What will that do? It's the pieces of the puzzle. But you'll never get there if you don't spend the time to read through it. Right. I'm that guy. I'm the annoying guy. I will beat you over the head with a service manual all day long because it was done to me, and I become a better tech for it.
Yeah, it's so worth it. What you're saying on Ford, I haven't checked out the O82 stuff, but I know they have a really detailed section about networks and CAN bus on all their vehicles with, modern vehicles with networks. The first time I saw that, I was like, holy cow. They break it down from like transceived and received messages from every module, that's possible on that network and which one's sending what message to what other one. And I mean, you'd really need to be in the weeds to figure out, what message is going to which one, but there might be that certain time where one specific thing's not happening. And okay, well, I know it comes from this module. That I wish we had access to on everything. Wouldn't that be fantastic just to have that engineering level information?
Oh yeah. I've had this discussion with a lot of people a lot of times. And I've run into exactly 2 scenarios in my career so far where the only way to prove out the fault was to decode the CAN bus.
Okay.
Fortunately, both times was when I was working for John Deere, and we had the ability to data log the CAN messages, and you send it to the factory, and they basically tell you, hey, it's either A or B. But both of them were 2 modules. One module was putting an output over the CAN bus. The other was receiving it and then supposed to perform a function. Well, within data PIDs, I've got one module B was, I'll say, an incorrect data PID. Module A was a correct data PID. But do I really know? Okay, so module A sees temperatures at 50 degrees. Module B is saying it's at 45. The only connection is the network. Is module A reading it correct, sending it out incorrectly, or is module B receiving the information incorrectly or decoding it incorrectly? So there's times when you run into it, and it's like you said, you got to be in the weeds, and I don't envy somebody who's up against that. It's fun after the fact, but you can go ridiculously in depth to some of this stuff, and that's something I was just discussing that with a couple people the other night. How far into the weeds you can get nowadays, with how involved everything is. And now with scopes becoming more and more and more popular again, I don't know how much you deal with it on the school level doing scope work and all, but one thing I've seen is there's been a lot of almost you're loading the gun for people, but you're not teaching them how to use it. You can find intake pressure waveforms and pressure pulse sensors and this, that, and the other thing. I see a ton of that. I see a ton of education on how to perform these tests, how to perform RC tests, how to perform this, even reading scan data. This is how you do it, not so much on the why. And I mean, it's hard. Number one, a lot of us are self-directing our own learning. So it's hard to keep on track and learn that. But I just see a lot, you'll see a lot of posts, a lot of questions. So I had this car doing A, and I did an in-cylinder waveform, and I scoped the CAN bus, and I did this. Hold on, why? And that's kind of what I would like to see focused on a little more in some things is the why. Why do we do things? Because I struggled with that. When I started out, I could watch Scanner Dan or South Main Auto, Eric O there. I could watch all them. Okay, cool. They pulled up fuel trim. They pulled up mass airflow. They scoped this. I get that. I get what they're reading. Why or how did they choose to do that test? And I think we lose that a lot. And I think that's another huge part of us going off into the weeds on diags and repairs is we get excited with new things we've learned, but we don't always know how best to apply them. And like I said, I'm not sure on the educator side. I mean, you guys already have your work cut out for you, bringing somebody up to speed for 2020, 2021 vehicles.
Yeah, it's very tough because the car keeps getting, bigger every year, but our time to teach, it remains the same. And so our focus has been, get them to be, masters or as close to we can as masters at the basics, basic electrical, basic skills. And then, they can take those into their individual careers and build on them. But that's still a tough thing because we got to meet the tasks of the ASE and we got to cover specific things. So yeah, it definitely is challenging. One of the things with scopes too is there's so many variables on what you can end up seeing for anything, whether you're talking about pressure waveforms with like intake or exhaust, and that's a big one where there's so many variables, but even electrical signals on a network or something. There's so many different things you can see. And the problem is odds are if you're using a scope, you're going to see something for the first time, especially when there's a problem, and you're like, well, okay, is this a problem? Am I actually seeing this correctly? And you may have fixed that circuit or that system so many times before effectively with traditional methods, but now you're using a scope and now you're questioning it because you see something that, well, you wouldn't have saw if you weren't using a scope, and it might lead you astray. And those are some of the, the hurdles that we definitely have to overcome when we're using this really advanced testing equipment. Intake and exhaust pulse waveforms. I struggle with those. I really do, because I see so much stuff and I'm like, gosh, I don't know.
And just how in depth you can go with that single waveform, to the point of seeing carbon buildup affecting the ripples, and you can see based off of the transfer points when it starts switching from high to low, if your cam's slightly, I mean, it's insane. And you can also go crazy trying to analyze every little piece of data. Just like, have you ever scoped, we'll say, 2010, 13, whatever, Chevy electronic throttle body, a CAN bus while it's running?
The CAN bus? I don't think so.
Yeah. So scope it, key on, engine off, and then scope it high and low, separate channels, and then scope it with the engine running, and you would swear to God that CAN bus is garbage. The waveforms.
Oh, you're talking about the chop. Yeah, I've seen that in a lot of GMs, and I've chased my tail on that 100%. Yeah, it looks awful. It looks terrible. Like, how can the module read this? And I chased it. I was like, well, it's got to be this power steering control module, but. It didn't change anything, and it didn't fix my problem. So
no, but if you go back to service info, and I believe I use GM as an example because if I remember correctly, they do say they're pretty clear. It's a differential signal, and the modules take the difference between them. So then if you were to, instead of scoping the channel separately, your positive scope lead on, CAN high, negative on CAN low, you're now seeing what the computer's seeing, which brings us full circle to code set criteria. Think like the computer.
Yeah. What is the computer looking at? What is it happy or unhappy about? And try to determine the same thing.
Yeah. Because software will never make sense to the regular technician as far as why would you ever do that. And unfortunately, we don't get to rewrite the software unless we're tuners. So we have to think like the computer, but analyze like a good technician. And that's kind of the fun of it until they do a software update and everything goes out the window again.
Yeah, they change it up on you. Yeah, they'll keep you on your toes, that's for sure.
Oh, yeah.
Well, this was awesome. You got anything else you wanted to touch on?
No, this was a lot of fun. I could go on for 2 days straight, service info and nitpicking everybody, but no, this has been a lot of fun. I enjoyed it.
Yeah, well, maybe we'll have to do it again. We could pick some specific topics or something, or maybe specific vehicle or service information platform and go through it. I'd like to do that.
Absolutely, yeah.
All right, one more big thank you to Chris for coming on the show with me today. We're going to have to do that again for sure. Like you said, I think we could have gone on for quite a while. Thank you to everyone else listening, and remember the giveaway to check out. I'll have all the details in the show notes. That'll include the link to Chris's YouTube channel as well, which I recommend everyone checks out. But check out the U-Scope giveaway. If you want to nominate yourself or someone else, you can send that to me via Facebook Messenger or email. All that'll be in the show notes, also on the Facebook page. Other than that, let's get out there and start fixing the world one car at a time.